Welcome back. So that's our big news. Get in touch if you haven't already. So I'm now on screen. That's Ian Rankin's latest book. You should really go and get it. And after that, I think Brian Cox, not the physicist, might be out of a job actually. But what do I know? Okay, got your drum rolls going? I hope so. One of Simon Bewick's mega idols, Ramsey Campbell. The Oxford Companion to English Literature describes Ramsey Campbell as Britain's most respected living horror writer. Woo! He's celebrating 60 years of writing in the field. Whoa! And in 2015, he was made an honorary fellow of Liverpool John Moores University for outstanding services to literature. We are so delighted to welcome Mr. Ramsey Campbell.
God bless you, God bless you. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? I hope you, thank God for that. All right. Well, what can I tell you? I should have brought my book to show you, but I know you pointed to it, and there it is. And this is a bit, oh, God bless you, Vic, you're going to flourish it. Yeah, there you go. Thank you very much. All right. And I don't know why, compared with everybody else, I've got this strange luminosity to me. It may be because I'm not really here, and I'm only just a spectre of myself. But let's hope that I can keep this up. This is an extract from this latest novel of mine. This is a published novel called The Wise Friend, and a small bit of background. Patrick Semple is a lecturer whose aunt Thelma Torrington was a noted artist who, it turns out, had a real interest in the occult, becomes apparent toward the end of her career. Patrick discovers that she's been visiting occult sites around the country, and this is a bit of a scene in which he himself visits one of the sites that she found significant, a place called Halfway Halt, an abandoned railway track. The railway tracks at Halfway Halt had been removed. If anyone had planned to turn the route into a nature walk, the scheme had been abandoned before they'd taken up the sleepers. The overgrown boards suggested stepping stones over a medium less solid than the ground they were embedded in. To my right, they climbed between grassy banks to follow a ridge that was eventually blocked by fallen trees, while on my left, the route descended into a cutting. My aunt had written something about the latter in her journal, and if I was to gain any insight from my visit, presumably it would be there. I measured that end of the platform, where a slippery ramp led down to the remains of the track. While the sleepers were spaced closely enough to invite my stride, they looked precarious with lichen, and I walked beside the vanished tracks instead. In a few hundred yards, the ruddy sandstone walls were higher than my head. I could have fancied I was descending into a past embodied in the strata of the exposed rock, or at least my aunt might have had such an impression. Trees perched on the edges above me, their contorted roots gripping the cracked stone. Patches of the walls bulged with lurid fungi, and other stretches were mottled with moss. About a quarter of a mile away ahead, a road bridge crossed the cutting, and I was halfway to it when a voice spoke close to me. In 300 yards, it said, turn left onto Riders Lane. The voice was distorting it because it sounded untypically shrill. I thought I'd switched it off before pocketing my phone, but I made doubly certain now. Having stowed the phone again, I advanced to the bridge where the arch was toothed with loose bricks. Its darkness closed over me as I glanced back. There was no sign of the station, just the artificial valley tapering into the distance. Of course, the perspective was hiding the platforms, not to mention narrowing the gap between the walls, as if the perilously tilted trees were urging them together. Was this what my aunt had seen? She had written something of the kind. I was still under the bridge when the phone said, in quarter of a mile, turn left to your destination. He sounded shriller than before, no doubt because of the acoustic, and I had the grotesque notion he was about to change agenda. I'm there already, I informed him, and the voice that wasn't his said, "Ready." I echoed from the arch. I muted the phone and shoved it in my pocket, and then I set out from the bridge. Trees leaned out further overhead as the downward slope grew steeper. Would my aunt have seen the blackened sky weighing them down? She might have thought the past, represented by the multiplying strata of the walls, was drawing us lower still. No doubt she would have appreciated how some of the sets of bracket fungus on the walls resembled pairs of lips. She could have envisioned the large beads of moisture that clung to the lichen as lidless eyes, their blank stares following me through the gloom. I hadn't undergone enough of her kind of fancies yet. Although the wind seemed not to reach down here, I kept feeling colder. The trouble was, I had no real idea of how she might have viewed the place. So there was nothing my son ought to avoid, and I should have imagined there might be. I was still trudging down the slope when the land above the cutting emitted a moist whisper that progressed into a hiss as it closed in, and the branches overhead began to writhe as if they were struggling to fend off the storm. The nearest shelter was the bridge I'd left behind. As I sprinted for it, the ground underfoot grew treacherous. It must be soaking up the rain, even if I didn't yet feel drenched. It felt no more stable than a marsh, and I dodged onto the nearest sleeper and then the next one up. They weren't quite as close together as I'd assumed, and the slope was steeper than I was anticipating. Wasn't this often the case when you have to return uphill? I told myself so while deploring the incompetence of the workmen who had laid the line, since the sleepers weren't evenly spaced. Indeed, each pair was a little further apart. I was having to stride wider. I felt as though I was striving to climb a ladder without being able to use my hands to clamber. And soon I had to jump from board to increasingly slippery board as outside raindrops plummeted from the trees to thump my scalp. I tried walking on the ground instead, only to slither backwards. I could easily have fancied that I felt the ground shift underfoot, and I retreated onto the sleepers, lurching from one insecure foothold to the next. I'd missed my footing more than once, landing on the restlessly insecure earth by the time I stumbled under the bridge. I did my best not to think the shelter felt even slightly like a trap. The downpour must be weighing on the trees, which looked bent on dragging the rock walls together. The prematurely nighted sky appeared to have narrowed the cutting and blocked it in both directions with blackness, closer than the railway station. I stood under the middle of the arch beneath the untravelled road and tried to be soothed by the incessant liquid murmur of the rain, rendered stereophonic by the bridge. I was finding reassurance in the ability of the storm to touch me when I began to hear a voice. I snatched out my phone, but it stayed mute. For a distracted moment, I wondered if I could be hearing an announcement of the railway station. Might somebody be listening to a car radio nearby? I strained my ears to make out the voice through the downpour. It sounded almost as thin and as randomly shaped as the rain. Was it whispering, "Must," or "Master"? No, there were more than two syllables. Not quite either of those. "Mist tells?" Not that, and I peered down the slope, where the sounds, almost indistinguishable from the rush of rain, appeared to come from. Perhaps they were just part of the downpour, like the twin globules of water that swarmed down a patch of lichen to lodge above an especially prominent outcrop of fungus, two thick piebald ledges pressed together. The rain was rousing the plump fungoid strips, causing them to twitch apart and extrude a swollen greyish tendril like a relic of a tongue. The spectacle appeared to locate the whisper and lend its substance. "Register," I was almost sure it said, "Register Solarum." I tried to believe that only the rain was shifting the fungus, however allied to the syllables the movements seemed to be. Perhaps the movements were making me hear words where none were to be found. I couldn't help recalling when the left-hand globule either lost its hold or burst, streaming down the wall, to be followed at once by its twin. The fungus drooped as though exhausted by its efforts, Then I caught sight of another pair of globules that had come to rest above two lips of fungus much closer to the bridge. Moisture eased the protrusions apart, and I heard the sibilation of a voice. Magister Stellarum. The downpour was abating. I could no longer mistake the voice for rain. It sounded soft as rotten fungus and similarly liable to collapse. Although the wind had dropped, I was seized by a fierce chill. I couldn't move or look away from the unnatural activity on the wall until it fell apart, the watchful globules drooling down the lichen as the strips of fungus sagged. What I was to have felt reassured. Not when I feared the presence was simply moving on and about to reappear. I held my breath until I had to gasp, but heard nothing beyond belated rainfall from the trees. The cutting had grown almost silent when I sensed movement overhead. My eyes were aching by the time I made out a swollen shape, like a bag stuck to the underside of the bridge. I thought its eyes were glinting darkly in the gloom, and other restless part of it bore some resemblance to lips. Suddenly I heard the whisper, amplified by the echo, until it sounded as though the bridge was pronouncing the words like a great stone mouth. It paralyzed me in my thoughts until a dreadful notion overtook me that the ill-defined object was about to relinquish its hold on the arch and drop on me like a huge, swollen spider. Almost before grasping, I regained the ability to move. I fled. The whisper ceased at once, which only left me dreading why it might reappear. I thought I glimpsed unwelcome features starting to take shape here and there on the lichenous walls, which were streaming with the aftermath of the downpour. I fancied I heard attempts to pronounce syllables that had grown entirely too familiar, however meaningless, tentative, almost liquid whispering behind, if not beside me, and once, far worse, ahead. The slope was gentle on this side of the bridge, but whenever I sensed the presence beginning to form close to me, I was overcome by a renewed chill, which drained my energy so much that I almost couldn't lurch from sleeper to uphill sleeper. I had a wholly nightmarish fear that I might never reach the railway station. Then somehow there was no longer one at halfway halt to reach.
Thank you so much for that, Ramsey. It was a pleasure to host you. And that is your book right there, in between and Ian's. So yes, thank you. Thank you so much. And I know it's been an absolute delight for Simon Buick to host you because you're one of his major heroes. So thank
you for having me. Thank you for having me.
Our pleasure. Okay, so who's it going to be? While I think on, sound like someone's mum. While I've got you here, we usually have a competition to win free books. We do still have that competition, but it is going to work slightly differently this week. So instead of just emailing us, there is a very brief survey at the end of tonight's episode. If you wouldn't mind filling that in, you will be entered into the draw to win free books and possibly some VNATB merch. Yeah, that's right. So also, if you want to talk to everyone, click panelists and attendees from the drop down just so that everybody can see if that is what you want to do. So who's next? What a lineup tonight. Eh? Jackie McLean, it's not a t-shirt, it is a hoodie. That's right. Jesmundo have pulled out all the stops and made me a lovely hoodie. Even poor Simon Buick, who does all the hard work, hasn't got one of these babies, but you could win one if you fill the survey in. So Suzy Aspley, I was going to say our very own Suzy Aspley, and she kind of is because she's from South Shields, which is not far from where I live, but she now resides in Scotland. She began writing her first book after a prompt at a writing retreat in the Scottish Highlands, which was 6 human teeth in a matchbox. Oh. And that reminded her of a story she once covered as a newspaper reporter. If anyone wants to drop a question in for Suzy about that story she wrote as a newspaper reporter, please do, because I'm dying to hear what that was all about. After pitching successfully at Dragon's Pen last year, she won bloody Scotland's 2019 Pitch Perfect competition. Woo-hoo-hoo! And a month later was shortlisted in the DHH Literary Agency New Voices Award at the first Capital Crime Festival in London. Woo! Her spooky debut novel, One for Sorrow, is currently out on submission, and she's now working about a book on revenge. So, everybody, my mate, Suzy Aspley.
Sorry, just unmute myself there. Can you hear me okay? Thumbs up, great. Thanks everybody. Okay, so I've brought my dark side tonight. This bloody wig is driving me up the wall, so now I'll be able to take it off after this. Okay, so the story I've written it for Vic and Simon. It's a bit of Geordie Noir, even though I've been away from the Northeast for a long time. And if you like seafood, there might be a trigger for you in this one. So just warning you. It's called Fog on the Tyne. It's my first night on the job. I'm afraid I'll be sick. If the boat lurches, if the tide's going the wrong way. I'm on the deck of the Northumbrian fast response boat. Its distinctive yellow and blue checker pattern marking it out from the rest of the river traffic as we sail down from the mouth of the Tyne. Damp from the river crawls into gaps around my collar. "Yeah, I'll read," the sergeant calls over. "Hope you've got your sea legs, they're neat." I smile, nod nervously, lick my lips, imagine salt already gathering there. There's an icy wind rolling in from the North Sea. A ship's bell clangs in the distance. I screw up my eyes, trying to see through the grey curtains swirling around us. Seagulls, which would normally screech hysterically overhead, have fallen oddly silent. There's just engine noise and water slapping at the sides of the boat as we slice through the gloom. "It's a repeat super the neat. Not going to see much on this shift," the Sarge says, speaking more to himself than anyone else. A lamp swings above the cabin door, a small searchlight moving back and forth. It's dark, but I can see a ghostly pale face staring back through the cabin window glass. I shiver. What was I thinking? Signing up to be the first woman on the River Tyne Marine Patrol? The Shields Gazette recently called it the filthiest job in the force. I've had better ideas for sure. But then I remember why I'm here. It's to feel closer to her, my sister. She was never found. There's only me, the diver, and the Sarge on shift tonight. But I sense something behind me and turn around. But there's no one there. They reckon there's sometimes seals in the water. Maybe there's one watching from out there in the choppy, dark sea. A luminescent glow swings out across the bay from the lighthouse. It's magnified against the fog creeping up the Tyne. North Shields Priory, briefly illuminated, and I grab at air as the boat lurches forward. We turn inland. The engine stutters a steady rhythm, staying just ahead of the encroaching Har that shadows us. Fishing boats are moored along the Shields side, strings of lights banging and clanging in the gathering wind. Beneath us, the water's as black as oil, the smell of seaweed and open ocean, replaced by the stink of diesel oil and overripe fish as we head upriver past Jarrow. I move towards where the Sarge is standing at the helm, feet apart, braced as if bouldered to the deck. His dark blue eyes are set in a leathery complexion. He scratches at salt and pepper stubble and steers a course further west towards the city. Once we're heading straight, he brings out a tin of tobacco, takes his time perfecting his roll-up. Sweet smoke whips around me before curling away into the night. A loud crackle of static breaks the moment as a call comes in over the radio. "Body spotted, town side of the Tyne Bridge. Please attend." "We're on now, bonny lass," he says quietly. "Hope you're not squeamish." He eases the patrol boat forward, picking up speed now that a recovery task is at hand. We pass the hulk of the Baltic to our left, once a flour mill feeding the nation, now an art gallery. A small crowd has gathered on the riverside walk beside the Hellfire nightclub, a regular haunt for the city's goths, people dressed as though it's Halloween already, or staring out into the waters beneath the iconic bridge. The Sarge switches on the beam of a searchlight, and within minutes we can see something floating near a bright orange buoy. Definitely not a seal. Dark red hair fans out around a figure, face down. We get close and our diver catches the body beneath the collar with a pole, pulling it into the side. Catch of the day, he says with grim humour. People watch silently from the shore as he and the Sarge haul the corpse up onto the deck, head and shoulders first. It's not an easy job, and I recoil slightly as it lands with a thud. Water pools out and the remains seem to shrink. He unfurls a heavy black plastic bag beside it and rolls the figure onto its back. Been in the water a while, this one has, the diver says. Might be her though. CCTV showed she jumped from here. I think of my sister, slipping into the water, alone. The air leaving her lungs, her life slipping away. I glance at this girl. Her face is unrecognisable, bloated. There's a gaping socket where her right eye should be. Lank hair hangs like pondweed around her face. Then I realise with sudden horror that her chest is moving. What the hell? With a grim chuckle, the diver pulls back the remains of torn clothing. But I see only a living thing. A giant crab has crawled inside the chest cavity of this poor girl. Once someone's daughter, maybe someone's sister, like I was. I let out a long, cold breath into fog that has closed in, enveloping us in this gruesome scene. I'm weirdly relieved at the discovery of the crustacean fattened up on human remains, but it's so utterly fucked up. Her eye is reflected in the light. The black pupil stares right through me. She's just another poor dead girl, I tell myself. And then I see it. Glinting against her grey-tinged flesh, a small gold cross. It's a cross I know. It's not my sister's. I reach up to my throat, but it's not there. I feel nothing. No warmth, no cross, no pulse. I open my mouth to scream, but there's no sound. The crab watches with pinhead eyes as the diver picks it up by one giant claw and throws it over the side. A heavy zip grinds its teeth slowly across my ruined face. Then darkness. Thank you.
Oh, Suzy, man.
Can I take the wig off now?
I don't eat crab, but I don't really like things that live in the sea, so you're really done for me now.
That's the only true bit of the story.
Oh, God. Thanks for that. Got a couple of questions for you. Megan Taylor would like to know who's peering over your shoulder. Also great reading.
Thank you.
Is that Jack?
That's my husband.
He's looking really well.
Yes, I know.
Alison Brady would like to know more about your journey since Pitch Perfect at bloody Scotland.
Well, a lot of my journeys involved Noir from the bar, to be honest, which has been fantastic. So I had a short story published in that very book earlier this year, which is brilliant. And I've done a few submissions this year. Everything's really slowed down, so I've decided to start a new book. And I had some really good news this week, but I can't tell anybody it yet. So it's not an agent or a publishing deal, but it is really good news. So I'm dead chuffed about that. So hopefully I'll be able to tell you by the Christmas Noir at the bar, if not before. But 2020 has been a bit of a write-off, really.
Can I give you a woo for the secret?
Yeah.
Yeah. Woo! Also, what's this story about teeth? Nobody asked it except me. I need to know.
Which one? The story I covered?
Yeah.
Oh, it was a pretty horrible story. I used to be a journalist up in the north of Scotland, and I had to cover this story, and it was about a fire, and the only thing that was left was the teeth of a family that died in a fire. But I was on a retreat at Moniac Moor, and Stuart McBride gave me a prompt, which was 6 human teeth in a matchbox. So that story came straight back to me, and it became part of my book. So hopefully one day you'll be able to read it.
Well, that was a lovely note to end your reading on, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And just because I haven't mentioned it tonight, this is still available from Forum Books and Amazon. Okay, so that was our wonderful Suzy, V-Not-B favourite. We shouldn't have favourites. You're all our favourites. Let's get another name from the hat. I don't think I'm going to sleep tonight, am I? Monsieur Skewis is up next. Ian Skewis is a freelance editor and proofreader for indie and debut authors and an associate editor for Bloodhound Books. His editorial debut for Bloodhound became a bestseller and has been longlisted for the Guardian's Not the Booker Prize. Woo-hoo! As an author, Ian's debut novel, A Murder of Crows, was also a bestseller and longlisted for the same award. Woo! He also writes horror, sci-fi and literary fiction, and his latest titles can be found via his website. Now, when Ian comes on screen, you won't see his name, you will see his website, which is www.ianskewis.com, which is where you can find his fiction. So again, somebody I've worked with at several Noir at the Bars in real life, and our second time for V-Not-B. Please give a huge round of applause to the wonderful Ian Skewis.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Can everybody hear me okay? Yep, good stuff. Okay, well, thank you. So what I'm going to read from tonight is a short horror story called A Trick of the Light. And this is it here. And this book is only available via my website, and it's actually free for subscribers. So if anybody would like a copy of this paperback edition, all you do is go to that website on the bottom there. And I'm giving away not one, but two horror stories. This is my other one that I've just released as well, called A Man of Many Parts. But the one I'm going to read from tonight is called A Trick of the Light. And I had a lot of fun writing this. It's basically about two sisters, Sapphire and her sister Ruby, and they have been invited to a castle where Sapphire used to live with her then husband, who's now deceased, Maximilian Steele. I think you can sense a theme beginning to emerge here. And basically, it's quite it becomes quite an arch conversation. And the encounter, they're there for the will, basically, the reading of the will, and that's where they encounter the housekeeper, Jade, and there is certainly no love lost between the three of them. And this picks up midway through the conversation, and it gets quite bitchy. So here we go, A Trick of the Light. You know, I've never liked it here, said Ruby, pacing around the room, her high heels striking the frigid stone floor. This place has always given me the shudders. She stared meaningfully at Jade. I've always felt right at home, retaliated the housekeeper. Sapphire had always suspected that there was something false about Jade. In the brief time she had known her, she had never seen Jade give anything close to a genuine smile. But never in her wildest dreams did she think it would end up like this. It was clear now that Jade owned the estate. There was no will. She just wanted to prove a point, that she was queen of the castle. However, it seemed odd that Max would have chosen her. He could have had almost anyone, and here was boring, bland, and somewhat devious Jade, sitting here as if she owned the place, which now, of course, she did. You're both very wrong about Maximilian Steele, said Jade. He wasn't the cold, unfeeling creature of your trite opinions. He was magnetic, charming, a man whose influence stretched far and wide, a man who was used to people giving way for him. Fearless is my word du jour. Ruby lit a cigarette. God, you pretentious little. He did have an aura about him, I grant you that, interrupted Sapphire. But he wasn't charming, and I don't believe magnetic is the right word for him either. He was a bastard, hissed Ruby through a puff of smoke. Sapphire gave a humourless laugh. Now, that sounds very like the Max I remember. She exchanged a look with Ruby, feeling a degree of satisfaction with their complicity. It seemed she and her sister were now getting the upper hand, and walking back out of this wretched place with that was better than nothing at all. But when she turned her attention back to Jade, She remained perfectly poised, perfectly still, like a spider waiting on its prey. Her gaze seemed almost hypnotic, and it unnerved Sapphire to such an extent that she felt the need to fill the uncomfortable silence. "Have you noticed how all the doors in this place are so big?" Ruby shrugged. "Well, it is a castle." "Yes," agreed Sapphire, "but did you know that Max was behind it?" "Behind what?" Sapphire could see that Ruby was bored and restless, no doubt feeling the money slipping through her fingers. Just before he moved in, Max had planned to have the height and width of every door in the castle increased. "Weird, huh?" "Grand designs," said Ruby, taking a nonchalant draw from her cigarette. "I thought that too, but I remember when I first met Max. We had dinner together in this castle. Afterwards, he took me to the library, where we had some brandy. And here's the curious thing. He had originally said he was going to take me to the study, but when we got there, he stopped suddenly at the entrance and changed his mind. I never thought anything more about it at the time, but when we got married and renovations on the castle were almost done, I moved in with him. I noticed that he avoided all the rooms that had not yet had their doorways enlarged. I began to wonder why. After all, I could easily go inside these rooms and I was smaller than him. So what was stopping him? I don't know. Maybe he was waiting until all the doors matched the size of his ego? Maybe, replied Sapphire, lost in thought, and not quite hearing her. I guess that's when I developed this silly idea that Max wasn't quite one of us. Sapphire gave an apologetic little laugh. Well, ain't that the truth, said Ruby. He tended to avoid appearing in public, but on those rare occasions when he walked into a crowded room, it was like the parting of the waves. People were awed by his presence. He avoided the sun too, which leads me to another strange fact. I saw his silhouette cast on the wall one day, and it was huge, far bigger than it ought to have been. That's just an illusion, explained Ruby. You see that effect in films and stuff. Perhaps, but something about him genuinely frightened me. That was why I left him in the end. Everybody was frightened of him, said her sister. But we know him for what he really was, a coward and a bully. You did the right thing divorcing him. Sapphire saw Ruby flash a look at Jade, but she wasn't rising to the bait, though she did begin to slowly rise from her chair as the sun fell below the horizon. Ruby took a long drag from her cigarette and narrowed her eyes calculatingly. What was that poem thing you said at the funeral today? Jade was now standing facing them, hands clasped in front of her. Do not stand at my grave and weep by Mary Elizabeth Fry, she answered with a patient smile. Ruby gave her a sarcastic round of applause. Almost impressive, dear, she said, the cigarette now hanging from her mouth. Not bad for a serving wench. You always were a snob, countered Jade. Ruby snorted. Well, I don't think anyone will be weeping now that the evil bastard is 6 feet under. Let the dead rest in peace, said Jade, with an authority that Sapphire felt she had no right wielding. Ruby hoisted the cigarette archly in her hand. I must say you've certainly come out of your miserable little shell since Max died. But try not to get above yourself. I'm sure he's left the money to his nearest and dearest, and that ain't you. She flicked the cigarette ash in her direction. Sapphire noted with some trepidation that her sister was evidently in denial. She also noted how Jade had seemed very confident throughout their little tete-a-tete. Unlike the sun outside, her look of predestination had never quite waned. Did she really drag them out here to this hellhole just to rub their faces in it? And what a night to choose for a cosy wee get-together, Ruby exclaimed, oblivious. Halloween. How tasteful. Sapphire shivered, unsure if it was from the creeping cold or the nagging sensation that something was amiss and had been since her arrival. She watched nervously as Ruby strutted about the place as if marking her territory, still blind to what was standing right there in front of her. So, this will of his, where's the executor? Ruby demanded. There is no executor, replied Jade. Sapphire peered at her questioningly in the fast-approaching darkness. Jade's voice sounded different, a pitch lower. She tried to catch her sister's eye, but she seemed not to have noticed. "Are you on drugs?" said Ruby disdainfully, letting out a final puff of smoke and throwing her cigarette butt on the stone floor, then crushing it underfoot, slowly and deliberately, making it plain that she wished it was jade. "We were invited here by the executor of the bloody will." "Like I said, there is no executor, only the executioner." In the gloom, Sapphire thought she saw Jade smile, the first genuine smile she'd ever seen from her. Except her mouth seemed to open a little wider than was humanly possible. To be continued.
Thank you so much for that, Ian. Creepy.
Thank you.
You've got a lot of bookshelf love in the chat, and also someone is asking about you. Have you got a Globes drink?
I do, but it never gets used. It's really just an ornament, to be honest. It's covered in dust. It's absolutely covered in dust. It doesn't get used at all, I'm afraid.
Letting the team down, not using it. That's all I'm saying. Thank you so much for joining us again. It was a real pleasure to host you. Okay, so final reader of this part of the evening is, drumroll please, CJ Cooper. CJ Cooper grew up in a small village in South Wales, another Welsh connection there, before moving to London as a student. After graduating with a degree in ancient history and Egyptology, she worked as a development worker in Nepal before joining the UK Civil Service, where she remained for 17 years before hanging up her bowler hat to focus on writing. The book club, it's right there, that's it, is her first novel to be published in English, and her second, The Verdict, will be out in February. My glass is empty, so I can't toast her, but if you would please raise your glasses to CJ Cooper.
Thanks so much, Vic. Can everyone hear me? Fabulous. Thanks so much for having me. I am, as Vic says, going to talk about my book, The Book Club, which tells the story of Lucy, who moves from London to a small village in the Cotswolds called Wesolowski after the end of a pretty disastrous relationship with a man who is both married and her boss. A couple of months after she's moved into the village, a new neighbour moves in next door whose name is Alice, and Alice suggests setting up a book club. And Lucy and her friends enjoy the idea, but as they are going along to the book club, they find that the stories that they're talking about have eerie parallels to secrets that they're all desperately trying to keep in their own lives. And as time goes on, those secrets start to become revealed with disastrous consequences. And so the bit that I'm going to read you from is fairly close to the beginning of the book. And it's the group of friends are getting together for the first time. That's Tom, Maggie and Rebecca, who are Lucy's friends in the village, and Alice, the new neighbour, and they are talking about how the book club is going to work. We could have themes, thrillers and whodunits one month, then feminist literature, or what do you call it? Magical realism the next. Maggie had knocked back her second glass of wine, and her volume had climbed a notch. Rebecca's lips tightened at the mention of feminist literature. She said, "Couldn't we have more of a mixture? Perhaps the classics. Loads of them are free on the e-reader, you know, out of copyright." Maggie shrugged. "Fine with me, I like my men in breeches." I waited for Tom to argue, but he was eyeing up the barman. "Lucy, what do you think?" Alice had turned to me, and I thought there was something nervous in her expression. Her fingers pulled at the wrists of her cardigan. Tom remained oblivious, and I decided to have to fight his own battle on this one. Besides, it was too warm to argue. The air in the pub was getting thicker. Perhaps it was all the bodies around the table. I ran my finger around the neck of my t-shirt. The skin there was hot and sticky. "Yes, sounds good to me." "Well then, that's settled." Alice looked as if her lottery numbers had come up, and I found myself warming towards her. She was trying so hard to fit in. The wine was making me drowsy, and talking became more and more of an effort as the evening wore on. Now and again, I felt Alice's sidelong glance on me as she asked a question or commented on something on which she evidently thought I should have a view. I wondered vaguely what she wanted from me, but I was too hot and tired to care. Gradually, I became aware of Tom and Rebecca bickering, their voices taking on the edge of people pretending their argument was trivial, whilst becoming ever more annoyed. It was something about where the book club should meet. I didn't happen to listen carefully to guess that each would be staking their claim to host it first. Then Maggie was interjecting, her blurry voice cutting through the clipped tones, saying she'd do it instead as long as no one cared that she'd only feed us shop-bought canapes. The wine glass had grown heavy in my hand. Maggie was still talking, but her voice now was a distant murmur. She was saying something about going away, a trip to a spa, but then her words ran into each other, and I couldn't understand them anymore. I put down the glass and tried to stand, but my legs felt as though they belonged to someone else, someone older and weaker, and infinitely more disposed towards staying where they were. Tom was looking at me, his lips moving, and there was a pressure, a hand on my arm, pale skin, slim white fingers. Then I was on my feet, an arm around my waist. My head was spinning and I thought I would fall, but the arm kept me upright, surprisingly strong. A bite of fingernails in my side. There was a face next to mine, pale grey eyes, warm breath in my ear. I caught the words down and home and felt myself nodding. Shapes slid past me, chairs, I think, a coat stand. Then a car, its seat scratchy against my legs, the smell of pine coating my throat. A door slammed. Green and flashes of sunlight, then cool air again. Alice's hair against my cheek as she leaned across me, undoing my seatbelt. I tried to get up and hit my head hard. For a moment the world wobbled, and I thought I would be sick. But Alice was pulling at my arms, and somehow between us I was on my feet. Gate, path, door, my door. But it was too late, my stomach was churning. I doubled over. There was red, something red, then blackness closing around the edges. My stomach heaved again, and I vomited over the geraniums. The front door was open now. I could see into the hallway, the big knot at the end of the rope handrail that ran beside the stairs. Alice must have found my keys. Somewhere beyond the nausea, embarrassment stirred to life. I tried to lift my head, to force my useless, flabby tongue to form an apology, but an acrid taste rose in my throat and I was sick again. Alice's hand was on my arm, pulling me forward. I tried to shake her off, sure that any motion would make me vomit, but she was strong, and I found my feet moving, just managing to summon the strength to lift them over the doorstep. I had to get to the bathroom, but the cottage had only one, and that was up the steep, narrow stairs. Climbing them seemed impossible. The hand on my arm had gone. Had Alice left? Or was she in another room? Perhaps she'd gone to the kitchen to get me water. I longed for water. My mouth was parched and sour. I stood there for a moment, watching the floorboards tip and slide. There was a scuff mark on one of them. I tried to focus on it, but the floor tipped again and I fell forwards, my hands and knees hitting the edge of the stairs. I tried again to speak, and this time I heard a small, cracked voice say, "Alice?" It sounded like it was coming from a long way away. There was no reply. She must have left. Perhaps she thought I was drunk and would be better left alone to sober up. The bathroom. I raised my left hand and felt my fingernails scratch the wall. My arm felt like lead. It fell to my side and I breathed in deeply, once, twice, pause, try again. I summoned all my strength, and this time my fingernails brushed something coarse, the handrail. I tried to curl my fingers around it, but it was too high, too far away. My arm fell to my side once more. I heard a sound, a sob, and realised it had come from me. My heart was hammering in my chest, and for the first time fear sliced through my clouded mind. Something was very wrong. I had to get upstairs. I stretched my arm forwards this time, reaching for the stairs above me. The wood was warm and smooth against my palm. My fingers found an edge and gripped it. I took a breath to steel myself and pulled. My body slid upwards, my useless legs following. Another breath, the other arm, an edge, grip, heave, rest. Again. Sweat ran down my forehead and stung my eyes. Somehow, eventually, I was lying face down on the landing, the thud of my heartbeat in my ears. I wondered whether I should try to get to my bedroom, to reach the phone there and call for help. An ambulance. Yes, I needed an ambulance. But there was water in the bathroom, cool water I could splash on my face and drink from the tap. And who knew how long it would take an ambulance to reach me here, in my pretty little cottage, in the pretty little village, down all those pretty, winding country roads. I reached out again and saw my hand white against the floorboards as I pulled myself towards the bathroom. There was something black at the edge of my vision. My heart was thundering now, shuddering in my chest as if it would burst from my ribcage. The blackness was creeping closer. I knew I had to keep moving. I had to keep going or it would close in on me, and that, it came to me with a sudden piercing clarity, would be very, very bad. Ahead of me, I could see the bathroom door ajar. I closed my eyes against the tiredness in my bones and reached ahead once more. My fingers struck something, and I opened my eyes. A pair of feet in silver ballet pumps barred my way. And then the darkness closed in. That's all from me. Thank you very much. And thanks, Vic, over to you.
Brill, thank you so much for that. It was a real pleasure, and I'm dying to read the book club, so I will crack it open now that you've read. It doesn't have to be kept pristine. Someone has suggested quote of the week, I vomited in the geraniums. And just before we go for a break, I am just going to let you all in on a little secret that I once went out with a bloke who came to my cousin's housewarming party and vomited in a flower pot. He didn't last very long, let's put it that way. Anyway, we're going to a break. We'll be back in 5 minutes. Thank you.
Well, it's a marvelous night for a moon dance. The stars all above in your eye. A fantabulous night to make romance beneath the cover of October sky. And all the leaves on the trees are falling to the sound of the breezes that blow. And I'm trying to place to the calling of your heartstrings that play soft and low. You know the night's magic seems to whisper and hush, and all the soft moonlight seems to shine in your blush. Can I just have one more moon dance with you, my love? Can I just make one more moon dance with you, my love? Well, I want to make love to you tonight. I can't wait till the morning has come, and I know now the time is just right, and straight into my arms you'll run. When you come, my heart will be waiting to make sure that you're never alone. There and then all my dreams will come true, dear. There and then I will make you my own. And every time that I touch you, you just tremble inside, and I know how much you want me that I can't hide. Can I just have one more moon dance with you, my love? Can I just make one more moon dance with you, my love? Well, I want to make love to you tonight. I can't wait till the morning has come, and I know now the time is just right, and straight into my arms you'll run. When you come, my heart will be waiting to make sure that you're never alone. There and then all my dreams will come true, dear. There and then I will make you my own. And every time that I touch you, you just tremble inside. I know how much you want me that I can't hide. Can I just have one more moon dance with you, my love? Can I just make one more moon dance with you, my love? Can I just have one more moon dance with you, my love? Can I just have one more moon dance with you, my love, my love, my love? Yeah, I like that, Dave. That's nice.
it is our final part of the evening. Thank you for sticking with